Hey everybody, it's Ben again, and I just finished A Smuggler's Bible by Joseph McElroy. This is his first novel. He wrote it at 36, and as a debut novel, I know it gets a lot of comparisons to V, and I can totally see it. It's a frame narrative centered around a bunch of vignettes, kind of like most first novels. It's an author just kind of flexing their writing muscles and trying all these different branches and writing all these different characters and everything to really get it out there. Um, However, there are some issues with this novel that I have. It took me a lot longer to read it just because I got bored while reading it. But once I get into like the actual narrative component of it, it'll make sense. So, like I said, it's a frame narrative, and the frame narrative is really cool. It's actually one of the few instances I feel where the frame narrative is a lot more complicated than the individual stories. Usually, frame narratives like in A Thousand and One Arabian Nights are pretty simple, or even like Mason and Dixon by Pynchon. You know, they're really just simple things just to facilitate all these different dissertations into people's lives and events and whatnot. But this one, the frame narrative is about a man named David who may or may not be created, and he is writing within a Bible and putting himself within the different memories through that. It's called the Smuggler's Bible. So it's this weird like sci-fi but not sci-fi concept. It's almost like Nine Monkeys or Kingdom Hearts 2. Sorry, where it's like he's able to put himself in there, but at the same time he's also able to change the narrative because it's written so he writes new stuff, he changes it. So you kind of get that effect how much of these memories are created, how much of them are real, and how much of them are altered at the same time. You never really get a true answer to the effect of why is he doing this as well. And those parts of the novel, that frame, the writing gets pretty complicated. You can kind of see hints of stuff like Plus or Cannonball in it, where he just kind of goes, he really plays with language, he really plays with literature, and even in the postmodern style, comments on the writing that he's doing, comments on what he's getting at. Like he's like, hey, one character says, why are all the stories in different styles? Because like he's doing a different style for each narrative that he puts in there. And that part is really cool, and that got you excited about the book. That's awesome. But here's where the problem lies too. Those parts of the novel are designated. Each page is designated by a letter. There's only 26 letters in the alphabet, and out of a 430-page novel, only 26 of those pages really focus on that element. The rest of it are just individual vignettes. Some of them which have to do with David, some of them characters tangential to David's life, and unfortunately, it's not really getting at anything that David is trying to look for in like the memory search or anything. It's really gets away from that. Now, you can say that a lot of novels like V from Thomas Pynchon do the same thing, where only really the character Stencil is looking for V and all the other characters is kind of fucking around. However, the difference between that is that with Pynchon, with V, and I'm sorry to do a comparison, it's just going to be one example, there's plenty of others you can go for. With that one, you're getting a wide range of characters and you're kind of getting a sense of the culture at the time. With this book, a lot of the characters feel kind of similar. A lot of them are well-read intellectuals, which you can still have a diverse cast of well-read intellectuals. Your job doesn't denotate your personality or your history, but unfortunately, a lot of them come out feeling similar. Now, this might just kind of be like an author thing, kind of like what Umberto Eco said, Name of the Rose was a failure, or Pynchon says Chronicle Lot 49 isn't that good, which I agree with him. But, in an interview that George Salas sent me in Vice, he said that he tried to put too much into Smuggler's Bible as a beginning author. And in some ways I agree and disagree. The range of the topics the characters talk about is wide ranging. Like I said earlier, the range of the characters isn't so wide. Now, that's not to say all the vignettes are bad. I really like the beginning part with St. John and how he meets a kid. The kid thinks he looks like his father, but it turns out he doesn't. And that little connection there and trying to be in the kid's life, and then all the individual stories with the neighbors, that part is interesting. But then parts later on, like the two middle sections, where it just devolves to like two intellectuals and a woman who is unhappy because one of them is not treating them correctly, and it leads to like violence. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere. The stories just feel way too similar to each other, and those parts are so far removed from David. You're just kind of like, what am I reading? How is this relevant to the story? And then you're not getting the same thing like in V, where you're getting a sense of the culture of like 1960s or 1940s New York, or post-colonized Africa. You're not getting a sense of that time period, even though it takes place in England. It really kind of feels like it can take place in any Western country. I know that might be, when you get to the details of that, you can say like, well, especially in this time period, England and America, are probably more similar than Westernization and everything, but what feels like an English novel. But it just for the most part, I just wasn't really getting a sense of the atmosphere, or like even like the city that it took place in. So because of that, you just kind of get a little bored throughout the novel. Or like later on, where David feigns amnesia, and he sent a bunch of chain letter, and people keep mailing him about his fake amnesia. That's not a great device to get all these individual characters' perspectives in their lives, because they ask David real quick, oh, you have amnesia, that sucks, here's my life. And one character comments on that, like, yeah, a lot of people are not really caring about your illness, they're just kind of commenting on their life. Here's my life. So like, that stuff is funny, and on paper it's a good idea, but in practice, near the end of the novel, you're just kind of like, well, some of these characters already know what is really the biggest point of this and everything. And so it's just kind of unfortunate where you don't get that wide range and wide scope of different characters. And then like the stuff they're talking about is kind of pedantic, and you're not really getting a great sense of themselves at the same time. It just kind of feels like McElroy was just trying to comment on as many different things as possible. But now, not to say that this is not well written, it is. And this is not to say it's a bad novel, it isn't. It's more like in the effect of like Vineland and Lot 49 with Pynchon, whereas it's not bad novels compared to other novels. Compared to other novels, it's still a magnificent novel. It just, in compared to McElroy's other work, it's not as strong as I would like it to be. I don't feel like it reaches even like the level of characterization in Letters 2, or I'm 70 pages into the wife slapping novel. Oh, Actress in the House. And even in that book, where it's kind of doing the same effects, there's just so much better characterization, and even though it's quirky, and even though it's focusing on characters that on paper might not seem the most interesting, I'm much more invested in that novel already than I am in Smuggler's Bible. So this is definitely like has a bit of first novel syndrome. It's not bad, but I would probably recommend it to McElroy fans and who want to read his whole vignette over. But for a starting point for McElroy, right now I wouldn't recommend it. I would probably still recommend the Letters book, because you get a better sense of his later writing style with that pseudo-modernism, and there's just so much better characterization in that book. Like, I really cared for the characters in that book. This one, I was just kind of like, get on with it. I felt like this book could have been better suited for 100 pages less. Where's the Bible? Where is it? So that's my take on Smuggler's Bible. Let me know what you think of it. I know there's a lot of little stuff that I left out, like the references to biblical names or the 7 voyages of Sinbad, but honestly, it's just window dressing. It's not that imperative on the plot of the book. But, I am glad I read it. I'm glad I'm reading McElroy, but again, this is kind of like the Vineland or the Crying of Lot 49 of it, or like, how similar to Lilo's lesser works. They're lesser in the scope of the authors, but they're still like such strong books compared to other books in literature. One of the stories in this book can be having fleshed out to a full story that other authors would do. It's just that, again, it's more like the scope of it, and like the scope of the characters just wasn't as diverse as I'd want it to be. And not like in a racial perspective or anything, just more in like they all just felt similar within each other as well. So that's Smuggler's Bible. Let me know what you think of it. I want to hear you guys' opinions. Go read V.